Welcome to Leadership Matters, a podcast from the Bailey Group. I'm your host, Kaylee Thomsen, president of and partner at the Bailey Group, where we believe better leaders create healthier workplace environments, healthier humans, and a better world. On this show, we explore real stories, practical insights, and honest conversations to help you lead yourself and others better. Thanks for joining us. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Leadership Matters. I'm your host, Kaylee Thomsen, and today I'm joined by Barb Krantz Taylor. I've had the honor and privilege of working with Barb for 12 years now. Barb is a licensed psychologist, a CEO advisor, and a master executive coach. She's one of the best when it comes to working with teams to help them lead with more confidence and clarity. Barb, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
I'm excited to have you back. And one of the topics that we're going to really dive deep on today is all about loneliness in leadership and why it's so prevalent throughout organizations, but especially at the top.
Yeah. Well, as you might imagine, when you're the CEO or the owner of a company, you have all the information that exists about the company. You have information about all the people. You have information about the finances. You have information about the success or lack of success, how projects are going. And some of that information you may not want to share with employees or with competitors. If you have a partner in your life, your partner may not really want to hear about it every day, even if they might be a safe place for you to talk about it. So it is, there are so many things that we wonder if we should share, and we fight with ourselves about who to share it with and what to share it with. But we are social beings. Human beings are social beings that often need to talk, need to write, need to somehow figure out what it is that I'm thinking and feeling. And we do that in lots of different ways, but we don't always know where to be safe with that or what's appropriate to share.
So, how do we go about determining that, Barb? It sounds like a big question.
Yeah, I mean, there is it's there's not a single answer. It's a matter of, I always suggest that people test things out, right? Think about the impact of the information on, not just on you, not just on the company, but on an individual. Individuals may not be interested. Other individuals may overreact or underreact to information. So you have to think about what's best for the business. Also, it's hard. People like to share things that sometimes that they're on the inside knowing, and so we ask people to keep things confidential, but we know that they don't always stay that way. So how is it that you decide who to trust and how to trust? Sometimes it's an instinct, but it also needs to be intellectual. It needs to be based on critical reasoning. It shouldn't just be an emotional decision at the moment. We've all had those times where we share and then we go, oh, either I shouldn't have shared that, and now I feel bad, even if the person was fine hearing it. Sometimes we share things and we get a reaction we don't expect, or an action that doesn't feel safe, and we regret sharing it. So so we chose to do what we felt was right at the time, and that's why sometimes what we feel is right isn't always right. So it's one of those things that you feel it out, but you also have to think about fairness. You have to think about need to know. You have to think about, is this going to help my employees understand more? We've all heard about transparency, and transparency is a good thing, but letting it all hang out at all the times is not something that you typically do as a leader.
What is the impact of oversharing, Barb?
The impact can be several things. One, it can be a lack of trust in you as a leader. If we know too much about your doubts and your fears, or about information, then people take that information and extrapolate into the future, that if it's happening now, it might get worse. If there's a little downturn in the business, people might start to panic. So some people get scared. Some people lose trust in you. Some people start worrying about their job. Some people can't handle the information. They may not have the perspectives on the business that you have. They may not have all the information, and they look at the world from their perspective. from their lens, which might be very small or might be very wide. And so you never know how people are going to react to things. Um, and then there's always if you're the leader, there's always that status differential. And so sometimes people may not always tell you what they're thinking or what they're hearing. It's always a sticky wicket.
Yeah. You talked about that status differential, which is something I know comes up often in coaching, especially when you're in a role with peers and then get promoted into a new role where you now either have management responsibility for what were your former peers or there's some sort of power differential there. How do you help leaders through that transition, Barb?
And that's a hard one because especially if it's the situation that you're describing where people get promoted amongst their peers, that relationship is different. A peer relationship, we often want to connect with them. We want to share that when we do trust our colleagues, which isn't always, but when we do share things that we might not share with our boss. Sometimes it's we don't want to admit we don't know something. Sometimes we want some help. Sometimes we're having some feelings about our boss that we want to talk about with someone else. And so when you used to share all that and then you become the boss, most employees I know don't like it when their boss talks to the peers about other people. And sometimes I've seen lots of leaders do this, they're trying to be transparent, they're wanting someone to talk to. But you break a confidence with one person and everyone's going to assume that they might be next. So that you have to change those relationships and you don't want to break off the relationship. You don't want to pull away so everything changes so much, but you do have to put some boundaries up about what you share. Otherwise, people feel there's an in group and an out group. And they might start wondering if they can trust you. The complexities involved are a lot.
How have you seen leaders most effectively set and hold those boundaries, Barb? Can you give us some examples?
Sometimes they're really uh, honest about that this is something that I'm not sharing. Sometimes if someone asks a question, sometimes you do a little white lie and say, I don't know. That's a really good question. Um, so it really depends on the person and your relationship with them and what their beliefs are, because I find people have lots of beliefs about what should be shared, what shouldn't be shared, the role of a CEO. There are expectations that others bring in, and if you meet those expectations, everything is fine. But if you do something that's different than their expectations, you may not have done anything wrong, but their expectations were different and it throws them off.
Sure.
So I think that asking a lot of questions, what do you want to really know, or what do you want to know about that? Sometimes you can just get more information too before you answer a question, but it's about being clear with your own boundaries too, that knowing in your own mind what you're comfortable sharing, what you could be sharing, with whom, you have to have your own boundaries on that and be pretty clear on them. And if you're going to break them, that's fine, but be careful who. I mean, there's so many leaders that's why CEO roundtables are such a good idea. Coaching is such a good idea because then those are people that you really do and can trust to be able to help you.
We talked a little bit about the downsides of oversharing. On the flip side, what are some of the downsides of not sharing enough?
Often it's about people will make up when the lack of information, people will make up their own stories. So if you're not talking about something or people think you're hiding it, then they're going to make up the reason why you're not talking about it. They're going to make up what's really there. And that can be false information, it can be wrong information, it could be there's a short-term issue, but the long term will be fine. So there's definitely the downside of undersharing is people don't understand your decisions. They don't understand everything that's going on. They don't have a context for why you're doing what you're doing or why the company's doing what it's doing. So yeah, there's equally undersharing is probably as equally difficult as oversharing. But where that line is, that this is the side to be on that's just right. This is the side to be on that's under or oversharing. That's not in the same place for every person, every business, every time.
Mm. I know in the coaching we do at the Bailey Group, we use a lot of assessments for personal insights and self awareness. How do you think about that self awareness piece when it comes to determining the level of transparency?
We all have our own beliefs about what we should talk about, what we shouldn't talk about, who to share that with, who not to share that with. And some of that's rooted in our personality and in our learning. Um, we may have had some experiences or early bosses, early experiences that said, if I share too much, I'm going to be in danger. Or if I don't share enough, I'm going to be in danger. So we have our own beliefs. Sometimes we've never talked about, we've just assumed those beliefs are the same beliefs that everyone else operates by. So we don't talk about, do you talk about this with your employees? Would you share this? Would you not share this? So sometimes we're left with only our own experience and our own instincts. And then sometimes you find out people do draw those lines in different places and they've had experiences where, no, it's really okay that you share that. I found that while it felt good sharing that at the time, it came up and bit me later. So talking to people that you can trust about where they draw the line, how they do it is really important. So you don't need to just trust your instinct on that because your instincts may not give you all the information you need, but you also have to have your own boundaries. There are some bosses that feel very comfortable sharing their personal lives, what's going on with their families, what's going on, and that's fine for some. And others are like, no, that's none of anyone else's business. And there's no right or wrong there. You don't have to be an open book. Again, transparency is good. And an amount of transparency is very good. It helps people understand, gives them more context, understand the complexity. But not everyone can handle all the information, reacts to it in a way that's mature, or reacts to it in the way that we want them to.
Yeah. I know you've facilitated roundtables around this topic, Barb. This loneliness at the top that so many executives experience. What does that actually feel like psychologically?
In my experience of my career, I find there's sort of few universal needs. One is that to be understood. What am I really saying? How do I feel? What are the issues that I'm wrestling with? We want people to understand what we're saying and then acknowledge that that's real for you, and also that I'm not abnormal because I feel that way. So what I find in this lonely at the top is when we can't share something, we sometimes feel the need to share it or we're afraid to share it. When we do share appropriately and the world doesn't crash down around us, there's a feeling of safety and normalcy that then feels comforting to people. Knowing that what you're struggling with is you're not the only person in the world. It's not because of your set of strengths and opportunities that no one could solve this. It's not about you that you can't solve it. So that feeling of normalcy and safety and knowing that no one's going to use this information against me or my company later. They won't. I don't know what people. Some people are very judgmental. Some people less so. Some of us are very sensitive to what we believe to be the judgments of others. And sometimes we share something and then we can't stop thinking about what does that person think about what I shared. We may never get the answer to it, but we can't let it go. If that's who you are and how you do things, you might want to share a little less because you're making that up in your head that it might be an issue for them. And it might be, but it might not be. And so if your boundaries about what I'm comfortable sharing, that you've lived a life, you've made mistakes, we all have trusted someone, said something we shouldn't have said. And when you're a leader, it's not just personal feelings, it's about your business. I know that a lot of business owners don't feel comfortable sharing how their business is going with other business owners, even if they're not competitors. They don't feel comfortable doing that. I'm finding that's changing a little bit, but I know earlier in my career, it was, how's business going? Great. Everyone said it was great. And now I find that sometimes people are like, well, it's often about the also the when there's external forces impacting our businesses, it's a little easier to say, well, it's a little slow right now, but the world, it's the economy, it's COVID, it's whatever. But again, some people take the world so personally that every decision everything that happens is about their influence on it. And
Mhm.
some things are out of our influence. They just happen. They aren't our fault.
What were some of those factors earlier on that did make it so difficult to be transparent and honest about how things were actually going,
Yeah.
Barb?
Well, I do think that the old expectation of leaders was they were more authoritarian, they were more independent, they were expected to be that mother or father figure that had all the answers and would make it all okay and keep that ship steady and wouldn't worry, wouldn't have doubts, knew all the right answers. That's not the image, not what we find is people want in a leader. And it's also not the expectations people have of leaders. So the good news about that is that when we ask people, what do you want in a leader? They want to be included. They want to be heard. They want to be listened to. They want to be cared about. And that authoritarian leader who doesn't want to share themselves, who wants to pretend everything's going great and they have all the answers, you don't you might not feel comfortable sharing with someone who may not seem to understand the world that you understand. Um, so I think the expectations of leaders have changed immensely. The style of leadership that people want, while we still have, I mean, leaders fall under a continuum of styles, but these days when we ask, it's very clear when you ask people what they want in a leader, the answers are very much the same. But Hogan folks and other people have done lots of research recently and have been writing a lot about the leaders we have versus the leaders we want. And the leaders we have are not always the leaders we want, but we still put certain kinds of people into leadership roles because we associate that with strong leadership. But those aren't always the leaders we want.
What are some of those factors that contribute to the leaders we want?
Being heard, being listened to, being included. Some people probably expect to be the decision maker, but a lot of people recognize that they want their input to be considered. They want their perspectives to be considered. And they want to understand why things are being done the way they don't want to be, yes sir, yes ma'am, I'll do whatever you say. We have a lot of independent, very strong employees that are really good, and we want to use their ideas. And so to leave ourselves away, to not take advantage of those perspectives and that expertise, you're hurting yourself as a business owner.
Where do you see the biggest gaps between the leaders we have and the leaders we want?
Well, according to those that are looking at this, often we put people into leadership that are charming, charismatic, extroverted, confident, powerful individuals that look like they got it all going on. They're all that in a bag of chips. That is often what looks attractive as a leader, and we think they're a leader like, right? But if a person who has that style, if they do not balance it with the appropriate level of vulnerability, with listening, with taking into account that other people have perspectives that they're not always right, if you can balance those things, there's nothing wrong with being charismatic and being extroverted and being talkative and powerful and confident. Nothing wrong with that. But if that's the only note you play, then you're not a whole person. And most of us want a whole person, but we don't want too much of a whole person. We want our leaders to at least be able to cope with what's going on. We don't want a leader falling into a puddle and not knowing what to do. Most of us don't want that in a leader either. But leaders don't have all the answers. They don't have to have all the answers.
I think that's really well said. You've been involved in pre-hire assessment now for a long time. How have you seen some of these shifts show up in the art and science of finding the right candidate?
Yeah. Well, there is some gender differences in expectations that what I found 5, 10 years ago that if a male leader, male candidate was very task focused and got results, even if they left some bodies in the wake, that was not important to hiring authorities at that time. They sort of said, oh, yeah, well, we know that they can be a little hard. Or, yeah, that might be the case, but that's okay. Um, that's not so okay now. And it doesn't matter if you're a male or female. I'm finding that most people want that balance between getting results and not leaving bodies in the wake and caring, truly caring about people. And some of us have some of us are more forceful in our style, some are more empowering in our style. We have to be flexible with the kind of employees and situations that we're dealing with. That's not easy for us when we're wired a certain way and have grown up a certain way. But these days, people really do want both. And I used to find that if they were female, they were expected to have that nurturing capability. Um, and there were suspicions that could they be as tough as they needed to be as leaders. Um, there is more value on the nurturing. And again, we still want results. We still need success. You need to get results when you're a leader, but you need to balance that with how do you lead all the different kinds of individuals and different people in your organization to get the best out of them. And that's not being, Bobby Knight, as if we all, the basketball coach. He had a style that was clear and sure, and he sure got results, but I could never have played for a coach like that. It would just have knocked me down. I would have not ever performed. And so some people like different things in leaders. Can you adjust and adapt as a leader? That to me, that flexibility, versatility has always been really critical for leaders, but it's not easy for any of us.
What makes it easier, Barb? How do we get more agile as leaders?
I think one is the true belief that there isn't one right way to be. You have to truly believe that there are advantages and disadvantages. We use the Hogan assessments, and one thing I love about the Hogans is it doesn't matter if your score, which is in percentiles, is anywhere from 0 to 100, and it's all within a range of normal. If you have a score of 0, there's upsides and there's downsides. If you have a score of 50, there's upsides and downsides. If you have a score of 96, upsides and downsides. You have to truly see that there's upsides and downsides to all and every style. So if you believe that, then you don't need to defend who's right and who's wrong. You can have a more of a choice about what would work, what would be effective for this person, for this situation, for me and my skills. It's all a judgment call. But if you truly believe that it isn't right to be a certain way at all times, then you can open yourself up. The other thing is to learn and practice what you're not comfortable with. It's sort of like handedness. Most of us, not all, but most of us have a preference for handedness. And while, for like I'm left-handed, and sometimes I've hurt my left arm and I can't do something with my left, so I do my right and I get better at it, but I can't wait to be able to go back and use my left. And personality characteristics can be that way. They can feel like handedness. We have a preference and we're comfortable and we do it better. But if we practice, we can get better at the other one, and that we may not ever be as comfortable, may not ever do it as well, but we can practice. But to be willing to practice, to be willing to fail, to when you've got a million other things in your life and in your business, taking the time to learn a new skill, yeah, that's a luxury that some of us don't feel that we have.
I love the comment though about how we can flex, and especially when we have the data or the self awareness around how we might naturally operate or where we might naturally thrive or be most comfortable, allows us the ability to pinpoint where we can further stretch ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's part of what humility is about. Is we all have something to bring to the world. I have something to bring to the world. So humility doesn't mean you're self-effacing necessarily. It means that you realize that I have confidence and I've done well and I know what I'm good at. And there are situations that don't call for me. There's situations where others do it better than me, and that's okay. I don't have to be perfect, and I don't have to be the greatest. That drives us. I'm listening to a book on the baseball 100, and it's talking about the top 100 baseball players in throughout baseball history. So going back to players that weren't even in the major leagues, might have been in the Negro leagues, and it's ranking them from 100 to the number one player. And it is amazing how many of those players had natural talent from when they were little kids, but how hard they worked. They were single focused to become the best player they could be. And that drove them, right? For some, that drove them. For some, the anger from poor childhoods or from relationships with parents drove them to become better. And and that drive is something that does drive us to be excellent. But there's a downside and a dark side to that drive sometimes, that we become less human to people, or they think we're arrogant, and maybe we are. That drive to be the greatest you can be, to be the GOAT, greatest of all time, that's enviable, but it's not realistic for all of us.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about the power of naming the emotions that we're feeling, the power of normalizing some of these experiences. Can you talk more about why that's so important given our human wiring?
I don't know that I have all the neurological reasons for that, but when we name something, we have a way of feeling, oh, that's it. I'm not alone in the world. Other people get it. We feel more often, we feel more in control, that we feel like we have now choices. If we name it, it's not this unknowable, unconquerable issue. Often that lack of naming, we feel roiling inside. We feel unsettled. We don't know what we believe. We don't know what we think exactly. We're vacillating emotionally. Often that feels very vulnerable. Often it feels like I don't have any bearings in which to choose. And when we feel that way, it's hard to then start getting our mind and our critical reasoning to take place, because we're having such feelings at the moment that our critical reasoning falls apart when we're having strong emotions. So when we name it, we also can help get that back into our critical reasoning. And now I can look at history, I can look at other perspectives, I can start using the scientific method, not just my emotions and my instinct, to solve problems, because the greatest leaders use their emotional intelligence, but they use their critical reasoning as well.
How do we really make sure that we're leveraging both, Barb? I think that's such a great point.
That's versatility. That's growth. Critical reasoning can be learned. It comes more naturally to some of us than others, given our backgrounds, given our families, given how our brains are wired. But I think learning, choosing to learn, choosing to see more perspectives, looking at points of view that you don't even agree with, and trying to understand where they come from. Those are ways to practice versatility, that accepting that your feelings might be one way, but you don't have to believe everything you feel, and you don't have to believe everything you think. You can have those are reals or data points, but you can choose to say, that's my perspective. That's how I'm feeling about it. But what do others think that I trust and respect?
Yeah.
That's just amazing. I think that's, as a coach, probably what I do most. I don't change people. I always tell them that, you're fine the way you are as a human being. There's some things you're doing that are effective and less effective as a leader. And I want you to be able to make choices on those things. And I want you to feel like you could make a different choice if you decided to make a different choice. And it's the learning of a new way of looking at something that opens people up to then having more flexible reactions, to choosing what you could do, not what you should do.
Yeah.
Because often shoulds are much more limiting, but coulds are a lot more options for us.
Can you share an example of where you've seen this happen in your coaching work?
I was talking to a client very recently, and all I kept hearing when he was talking about one of the challenges he's facing was, he said over and over again, I know that I should handle it this way. I know what I should be doing. I should do X. But he wasn't doing those things. So I said, so I'm curious about your choice of the word should. Tell me about, you keep saying you should. but you're not. So tell me more about that. And that was sort of like, it was a curious question to him. And he said, well, there are these, and where they came from, whether it's from his wiring, his parents, who knows? But he just kept feeling like there was this direction that would be the right direction to go, but his own instincts were saying, I don't want to. It doesn't feel right to me. But the should was stronger than his own trust in himself. So I said, well, let's reframe any should that comes up. I just want you to practice for the next few weeks, reframing that in your head to you could. I'm not saying you shouldn't do what you should think you should do, but you don't have to. Like, that should, I'm not sure that should is right. So let's just, first of all, practice saying, instead of I should do X, which is a judgment, to I could do X. And then he came back and he was like, well, that was freeing. That, and so it just, because again, it didn't have to deny that the reality that he was feeling something and thinking something, but then he could contemplate things without feeling like he was doing the wrong thing. So it was very powerful. I did that same practice. Probably I heard that advice from a therapist I worked with years and years ago when I was a young person, and it changed how I look at things too sometimes. I could do that, but I don't have to.
Where do you find yourself shoulding most for yourself?
Oh, good question. Usually it's about I've been trying to slow down. And I used to have a very busy life, and I was running all the time and every night be out, and I'm not wanting that anymore. But I still feel like I should be busier, and I feel like should be doing active outdoors things. Somehow there's some good leisure activities and some that there's something in my head that tells me that you shouldn't spend time doing that, right? And I'm been working on, if I feel like sitting and staring at the birds for a half an hour and not doing anything productive, that's not I don't have to think that's a should.
Yeah.
I can I can have downtime. So that's a place for me recently where as I'm slowing down, um, to not be busy.
Mm. What is it about? What's your theory, Barb, on our human nature to should on ourselves?
If you go back to religions, some religions believe that there's our natures aren't so good, but we have to, then God and angels will help us do the right thing. So if you believe that, then your instincts might be leading you astray, right? Without some sort of modulation. Now, I happen to believe that we have good natures and not so good natures that are constantly impacting us. And so often it's from parents, from upbringing, depending on the rigidity of our thinking, that what I'm not doing must be better. Or we look and compare ourselves to other people and see how they're doing something. And comparison, you've probably heard, is the thief of joy, right? Comparison that might work for them, but it doesn't have to work for us. Um, there's oh my that what a complex emotion that is. And but we often do, we look and I must be better than I am, or I should be better than I am. We look at other people and how they seem to get through life, or the success they seem to have. And what I've learned is that I don't care how successful, I don't care what level of leadership you're at, I don't care how fine of a human being you are and how fine of a leader you are, we've all got our stuff, and we all have made mistakes, and we all torture ourselves sometimes with those shoulds, when we could all get off our own backs a little bit more.
That's really powerful. It also gives you agency again versus feeling like I'm being pulled towards this should that I should be doing, where it could be a very viable choice. It could be the best choice,
Yes.
but you have the agency to choose.
Yes. And that's also how you build trust in yourself. When I know that a lot of times when leaders are shoulding themselves and they're thinking that the right answer must come from outside themselves, like there must be a role model or a manual or the right answer that some expert in the past figured out that they haven't figured out yet.
Yeah.
And often what I'm doing is I'm helping them understand that the questions that they're dealing with as leaders don't have easy or best answers. There are stakeholder groups that feel differently about what you should do. There are no perfect, elegant solutions to some and many of the leadership decisions we make. So if we're looking for that guideline of what I should do, there isn't a should. But that means then I have to trust myself, my critical reasoning, my emotional intelligence, trust the future, trust other people. We have to then trust in all of that. And if we've never done it before, none of us can read the future. Uh, how do you learn to test, to trust, test, to deal with failure if it doesn't work out? It's easy to say, "Oh, pick yourself up. We win or we learn," right? But it doesn't feel good to fail, and it doesn't feel good to make mistakes to many of us. And how do you recover? Getting trust in yourself that I may have been humiliated, I may have made a mistake, I may have been embarrassed, I may have felt shame, but I did recover and I can recover. And what did I learn? Those are wonderful things that when the feelings have died down, to be able to find a safe person to talk through those things with so they don't retain so much power and fear to run away from that. That's definitely a learning process and learning that you're strong enough to withstand that.
Yeah. Especially if you've never withstood it before, to your point.
Yeah, some people are very talented and due to their lives, their choices, they may never have really failed or really made mistakes. And then they do. It's not easy.
Hmm. So, practically speaking, how can coaching help with this, Barb? I know you mentioned part of your work is saying there is no one right answer. And I know I encounter that in my coaching work as well. How do you help people?
I do believe that people should be the arbiters of their own destiny. That they have wisdom inside themselves that feels right for them. I just truly trust in that. At a given moment, it may not be clear. So if I'm by asking questions, by supporting someone's little voice that make I don't know if I'm right about this, but sometimes I think we've probably all said that at some point in our lives. Bringing out that little voice as to where's that coming from and what is makes you say that and what makes you doubt that. Often people go, "You mean I'm not crazy? That could work? Yeah, let's talk about that. What's the worst that could happen if you did that? What's the best that could happen? What are the downsides? What are the upsides?" I want people to be prepared, not be naive. I don't think you have to trust and believe that it's all going to work out. That positive attitude is lovely and it allows us to take some risks, but I can't predict the future. I don't know if it's going to work out. I want you to be prepared, when we're engaging, whether it be in a difficult conversation or a difficult decision about our business and our processes and what to invest. We don't know if it will work out. We can guess and feel like it will, but it's all a bet. And sometimes that bet feels like it's 90% going to work, and sometimes the bet feels more like 50-50. I want you to be prepared. And what are the signs that it's okay? I made the decision, it's still going well. What are the signs that maybe I need to change this? I think we need to be prepared for those things. And so, what's your plan? What's plan B, plan C, plan D?
If I'm out there and I'm feeling lonely, what parting words of advice would you have for me, Barb?
You're not alone. Um, I'd want to know who you can talk to that would be a good choice for you. Who's going to not judge and not call you crazy and not tell you what to do or to say, oh, whatever. Who's going to stay in there with you for your decision making process, help you go a little deeper to understand what are all the considerations that you want to do? What are those little fears? Someone who's safe enough for you to do that. It could be a coach, it could be a friend, it could be a fellow business owner or a fellow CEO. It's not just one person. It could be your spouse. Who is it that you feel like you can explore all the sides and all the pieces so that you are prepared whatever might happen?
Mm. So find your people.
Yes, find your people.
Thank you, Barb. This has been such a rich discussion.
Thank you.
And thanks to our listeners. Join us next week for another episode of Leadership Matters.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of Leadership Matters. If today's episode resonated with you, would you do me a favor and share it with someone you care about? To learn more about the work the Bailey Group is doing in the world, check us out at thebaileygroup.com or follow us over on LinkedIn. We love sharing useful articles, helpful resources, and valuable tools to help you expand your leadership capacity. Like and subscribe, and join us next time for more honest conversations.